RI Academy Podcast One Student, One Creativity.
What is more dangerous than a cracked soil? What is more frightening than a failed harvest? More unsettling than an empty well? Perhaps it is the moment when people begin to lose their hopes, when silence replaces solidarity, when resignation replaces responsibility. Welcome back to RI Podcast, One Student, One Creativity. This is Literature in ELT Podcast, a space where literature is not just something we read, but something we experience, question, and live through. Today, we're going to explore the novel Kemarau by A.A. Nafis, a powerful Indonesian story about a village struggling through drought. But this is not only about dry land, also a story about moral dryness, social tension, and the struggle for human resilience in difficult times. To guide our discussion, we use the reader response framework developed by Richard Beach and James Marshall. This framework reminds us that meaning is not fixed inside a text. Meaning is created when readers interact with it. With me, Agnes Indah Pramudia, and two insightful guests. Here there is April, an ELT specialist who integrates literature into language classrooms.
Hi, my name is April and you can call me April.
And Vinny, who approaches this discussion from a sustainability perspective.
Hi everyone, my name is Vini Atika and you can call me Vini.
So without any further ado, let's begin.
RI Academy Podcast One Student, One Creativity.
In many classrooms, literature is treated as something distant, something to analyze structurally, summarize, or test. But what if literature is actually one of the most powerful tools we have to shape critical and environmentally conscious learners? April, why is the reader response approach important in ELT today?
So because reading is not about passive decoding. Louis Rosenbold argued that reading is a transaction between the reader and the text. So students bring their experience, beliefs, and emotion into the reading process. So when we apply reader response in ELT, students do not just ask like, what does the author mean? But they also ask, what does this text mean to me? So, and that question changed everything.
So literature becomes more than language practice?
Exactly. It becomes a reflective space where students develop vocabulary, critical thinking, and emotional awareness at the same time.
Alright. And today, that reflection leads us to climate change, a crisis that is no longer abstract, especially in tropical countries like Indonesia. The first stage is describing. Before interpreting, before judging, students must first learn to observe carefully. So, from your both perspective, what do they notice in Kemarau?
In Kemarau, they describe a dry and fragile village. The earth cracks, rice fields fail, and water becomes scarce. People also grow anxious. In ELT terms, this stage built environmental vocabulary such as drought, irrigation, crop failures, scarcity, and resilience. From here, students practice descriptive language while engaging with environmental realities.
Yes, and also we can see that from a sustainability perspective, this description reflects real climate patterns. And we can see that from report Intergovernmental Panel of Climate Change show that extreme drought are increasing in frequency and intensity in tropical regions. So, when students describe the setting of the novel, the student also indirectly describing our work.
Yes, that's true, that's true.
Yeah.
So awareness is begin with attention, and attention begins with description.
Sure.
Alright, so once students describe the drop, they begin asking deeper questions. Is it only a seasonal event, or could it be a symbolic?
Actually, many students interpret the drought metaphorically. Not only the dryness of the land, but also the dryness of compassion, the dryness of cooperation, and the dryness of leadership. They begin to notice how crisis reveals character.
Yes, and that interpretation resonates strongly with today's climate crisis. And also, we already have scientific data, we have technological solution, we have yet global action remains slow, but sometimes the drought is not in nature because it is in collective human will.
Yes, it's in collective human will.
That's
Alright, so literature allows students to explore uncomfortable truths without feeling attacked. It creates distance, and through that distance is clarity.
yes.
In the conceiving stage, imagination becomes central. April, what usually happens here?
Actually, I asked students a simple question. I asked about, if you lived in this village, what would you do? At first, they hesitate, but finally the ideas begin to flow. Like, they suggest building water reservoirs, creating community irrigation systems, and also planting drought-resistant crops. Even they try to organize the environmental education programs. It can say that they move from analysis to possibility.
Yes, and that's powerful because sustainability requires imagination. And also, of course, we cannot build a better future if we cannot first imagine it. And then literature becomes a self-simulation phase where students can explore creative solutions.
Perhaps education is not only about explaining the world, but also about rehearsing better version of it.
Yes.
Alright, now we enter the explanation stage, which is the analytical phase. From both of you, what is your perspective about the phase?
Okay, so from here, I think students begin connecting the fictional drought to real environmental causes. They ask, is this purely natural, or does human activity play a role?
Yes, and also, of course, the discussion expands to issues like deforestation, illegal logging, and then forest fires and carbon emission. And students connect literature to Indonesian environment challenges.
Alright, at this point, English is no longer just a subject, it becomes a medium for global dialogue. Students are not just practicing grammar, they are practicing responsibility.
Yes.
Yes.
Alright, when you ask students if they have experienced drought, what usually happens here?
So, what usually happens here when the atmosphere changes immediately? Some students share memories of well drying up, and others also talk about haze from forest fires. Some also recall crop failures in their hometowns. Suddenly, we can say that suddenly the novel no longer feels distant.
Yes, and that personal connection transfer a global crisis into a light reality. And also, when issues become personal, learning becomes meaningful.
Yes, that's true.
What emotion usually emerge here?
Of course, sadness, and then anger, and helplessness, and also sometimes guilt.
But those emotions are not distraction, they are catalysts.
Yes, that's true.
Because research shows that emotional engagement improves long-term learning retention. And then people act not only because they understand a problem, but because they feel connected to it.
So, literature teaches empathy, and empathy fuels actions.
Yes.
Alright, the final stage is judging. Students evaluate the villagers' choices. Were they passive? Were they resilient? Or were they divided? But eventually, the judgment shifts inward. If I were there, would I act differently? Perhaps that is the ultimate goal of literature in ELT. Not judging characters, but examining ourselves. So, literature does not bring rain. It does not extinguish wildfires. It does not lower global temperatures. But literature shapes perspective, and perspective shapes actions. In ELT classrooms, we are not only teaching language, we are shaping future leaders, teachers, policymakers, and citizens. When students read critically, feel deeply, and imagine responsibly, educations become transformative. Perhaps the most dangerous drought is not when rain fails to fall, but when compassion stops growing and responsibility dries up. Today we have learned that reading means to observe carefully, to interpret thoughtfully, to imagine boldly, to analyze critically, to connect personally, to feel deeply, and finally, to judge ourselves honestly. Thank you for listening to Literature in ELT and Sustainability. Stay critical, stay reflective, and stay eco-conscious. See you in the next episode. RI Podcast,
One students, one creativity. See you.
RI Academy Podcast, One Student, One Creativity.